Hello and good morning. Hey, hi guys, my name is Stacie and I'm one of the teaching pastors here at Cassis. And just give me a minute, I didn't know they were all gonna stay here. Peyton, is she still here too? Super cool. Thank you for sharing your baptism and being here. And I love that you had a whole cheering section that was like, I love them. And we got to watch that family and it was so cool. I got to sneak out in the corner and get to see it. Neat. I get to hang out with them all the time. They're pretty cool. Like I said, my name is Stacie, and I am excited to get to be here with you guys today, especially because we are starting a new series today. It's a 2-week series that we're calling The Whole Picture. And what we want to take a second to do is to talk to older Christians and younger Christians, asking if there might be unique roles, unique opportunities for us to come together, that ultimately when we do come together, do we actually have a chance to paint a more whole picture of Jesus Christ, of his heart and of his love, not just here, but to our greater Tucson community. And what I've realized is that I'm pretty lucky where I've actually had a lot of what I'm going to call multi-generational relationships in my life. A lot of relationships with people who are much older than me, but also much younger. And I remember one of my first, when I graduated from high school, I had a little bit of a tough time with God and church in high school. And so when I graduated, I wanted to find a way to stay connected. And I didn't really know how to do that. Like I didn't know how to stay connected to church. And so what I decided is I'll find a way to volunteer. And so I chose to become a middle school small group leader right after I graduated high school. And so if you've ever spent time with like an 18 to 20-year-old, like we're doing our best. Like I walked in and I remember walking in as a small group leader, like with this weird balance where I think I know absolutely everything and I don't know yet that I don't. But also like I have all of these questions and these doubts and these insecurities, and I'm sitting down with this first little group of 11-year-olds and I'm going, they're just gonna give these to me? Like, what do I do with this? I hope I don't mess them up somehow. Like, I still feel like I'm in the midst of figuring all of these things out, and now I lead them. And so I remember when we showed up to middle school to be these young leaders, Seth at the time, he's one of our pastors. He was the pastor over middle school, and he had this older couple who were like his right-hand leaders. And he said to them, I want you to focus on mentoring these new young leaders. I want you to focus on making sure that they feel included, but also developed as leaders. And this couple, we were in our early 20s and they were in their early 40s, because I remember they had a student who was in high school. So that was kind of our age split. And these guys were absolutely awesome. They took it so seriously to show up for us, these young leaders, and to make sure that we knew we had a place in middle school. Like I remember one of the things they did, if you've ever walked in Target, they have this like dollar section when you first walk in, and it's silly stuff. It's like crowns and slinkies and erasers or something like that. And so they went through this dollar section and they got almost like this treasure chest of nonsense, and they would show up to leader meetings and they would intentionally use that to celebrate all of the younger leaders. So if you showed up on your birthday and you turned 20 that day, you got a little crown and all of the leaders would pause and sing happy birthday to you. And it kind of was silly, but you were also like, they see me. Or if you went to your first middle school event as a leader, they would give you a slinky. And it was something about receiving a slinky and this recognition of like, yes, I did show up to paintball for the first time. That you just, as a young leader, you go, they see me and they care if I'm here. And that would happen in all of the trainings. And it was just so much fun. But then in addition to that, they really cared about us as leaders. And so they would show up and they would challenge us. And they would ask us questions and they would help us become better small group leaders. And they had this really big care, not that we just see ourselves as more a part of middle school, but that we actually from that 18 to 25 range saw the importance and the value that we could bring to Cassis and the church as a whole. This was just a care for them and something that they wanted to step into and help lead us through. And it was amazing, and it did great things for us as leaders and our place in middle school. But one of the things I remember best about them is that they didn't just stop there. They led us so well in middle school and it was meaningful, but what they decided to do was ultimately actually open up their lives to us. They made us almost like a part of their family. They chose to do that. So for instance, they would do things where they would have like a Super Bowl party and they would host it at their house. So they would invite all of these young people over, and then they would have the craziest thing. They would set up this like huge nacho bar, which at that time you walk in and like all I can contribute are Oreos. But you made like all of this food, and I'm so excited. I will give you Cheetos if this is what you will do for me. And we got to hang out and have this party. Or they would come out with us and they would join us for like trivia, and they knew so much about so much, and so we would do a lot better. And I just remember thinking, like, these people they're so fun, and they're just opening up their lives to us. And what I started to recognize is the other gift that they gave me is they started to just live really, really authentically right in front of us. Like, I still tease them to this day. They would actually have disagreements, maybe even an argument, right in front of us, sometimes in their home, sometimes in a meeting. And to watch this married couple pick on each other playfully, but disagreeing and coming from different places with different perspectives, but doing it so kindly, but also just so openly, was so meaningful to me at this place in my life. Because when I showed up in my early 20s, I remember my faith just felt really, really fragile. I wasn't sure yet where God was at, and I wasn't sure where I was at with God, and I wasn't really sure that I had a place in church for me and what that fit might actually look like. And then here came this couple who would just live so honestly, and they knew what it was to grieve. They knew what it was to have loss, but they also really knew how to celebrate. And they knew what it was to have gone through life and chosen to trust God with that, and yet still have questions and wonders and doubts, and show me that that was okay. And I got to experience this bit of life. And what I've learned since then is it really felt like when I showed up after high school, I was doing my best, but I really just had this partial picture of who Jesus was. I had this very cloudy, uncertain idea of what the church might be, what it was supposed to be, what my role might be in it, and I was doing my best to hold on to it, but it was really tough. And then here came this couple who just showed up and lived life right alongside of us, and suddenly it was like this image of who God really is, this image of Jesus's heart suddenly became a lot more full. Suddenly became a lot bigger. And suddenly Jesus's love and compassion and goodness was just a little bit more clear, and it made a little bit more sense. And I realized how they're living, what faith looks like, and what they show me Jesus's heart could be, I can find myself in that. That makes sense. How they participate in church, I might have an opportunity in that. And it took this kid with a very fragile faith and said, here is a much wholer and more clear picture of who Jesus is and how I might get to partner with him in this world and in this church. And that's actually one of the reasons why we wanted to do this series, especially recognizing, well, I've been really lucky to have a couple multi-generational relationships that have had that impact. They're not actually all that common or all that easy. In fact, statistically, just statistics, American adults, only 30% would say that they have a meaningful relationship, connection with someone who is outside of their age range, which means plus or minus 10 or 15 years from their age. Only 30% say that they do have that in their lives, which means potentially, maybe even in this room, we might have 60% of people, more than half, walking around saying, I don't have that, and possibly even holding just a partial and unclear picture, understanding, and idea of who Jesus might really be, of how important they might actually be, of what it looks like to be a part of the church or to partner with Jesus's love in this life. They're just not really sure because they might not have somebody in their lives who wants to come alongside and help them see that more whole picture. In fact, maybe for you in here, you could ask yourself, if you're in here and you know that there is a generation or two younger than you, which is most of the people in this room, if you've got a generation or two younger than you, ask yourself, do I have someone in one of those younger generations that I have a close, meaningful relationship with, that I have let them into my life and that I have some access to their lives also? Or maybe the inverse question. Ask yourself, do you have a generation or two older than you? And if you think about those generations, do you have someone in one of those generations that you say, I can go to them? Not just maybe for work stuff, maybe even for life stuff, faith stuff, to ask like a decision-making question. Do I have someone in those older generations as a part of my life? It might be some of you. But based on statistic, I wonder if there's a few of us who go, I don't know if I actually have that. And just so you know, I think there's a reason for that. I think there's an aspect to our world and sometimes even our society that doesn't necessarily encourage multi-generational connections. I think sometimes we live in a space that encourages or maybe exemplifies kind of sticking to your comfort zone, being surrounded by people who might look like you and think like you, which also means reflects a very similar age range to you. And I actually think when life gets tough, stressful, messy, that becomes even more true. That when life gets stressful, even more do we want to pull back or isolate or draw lines and say, I'm gonna stick with people who are comfortable, and I'm gonna tune out voices that might not sound like mine or might not be saying something that I fully understand. And it makes some sense if it's exemplified around us. But I think part of that is because I don't think society is seeking to anchor itself in Christ's heart. I don't think society is asking, what are the greatest ways that I can show Jesus' love today? But we as the church are. We as the church, when we come together, the Bible actually tells us we get to be Jesus' body. We get to be an image and an experience and an expression of God in this world. And so it might be a little problematic if when stress happens, people think, the church looks just like us, and they draw division, and they pull back, and they go back towards their comfort zones. That might be problematic. Instead, what if they experienced a church and a group of people that said, we actually, even in difficult moments, we want to lean in and we want to unify. We want to be willing and brave enough to cross those generational lines because we think ultimately that makes us a clearer, better picture and experience of Jesus' heart. That helps us best bring Jesus' love to our community and to the people that we most care about. So we want to get to take 2 weeks to be able to talk about what that might look like. Does the Bible have any unique roles or opportunities for older Christians or for younger Christians that we might be able to consider stepping into? And so today, I have the privilege to be able to speak to older Christians. And what I want to tell you is there is not an age range directed to this, because frankly, it kind of depends on who you are and where you are. Like it just does. It depends a little bit on your season of life. For myself, I know I have a couple of older friends. And so when I come to them, I'm definitely coming as a younger Christian because I'm seeking advice or encouragement or something. But I also know I hang out with these high school students. I'm over there with your preteens and your teens all the time. And if I ever make the mistake of letting them know the year that I graduated high school, because it has officially become before they were born. It has officially hit, even my seniors, it is before they were born. It has officially happened, and I watch their faces be a little confused and then a little horrified. And so over there, I've already become one of the older Christians. So it just depends on who you're around and who you are and what season you're in. So identify how you want to, but I also think both of these weeks, there'll be something in it for each of us to consider our place and some of the things that we might want in our own lives, as well as for this world and for Tucson and for our community. And so today, to speak to older Christians, we're gonna be in a book of the Bible that's called 1 Peter. So if you are someone who likes to turn to that, we're gonna be in 1 Peter, specifically 1 Peter 5. If not, there's gonna be verses on the screen, so you'll be able to follow along. But before we get to 1 Peter 5, what I would love for us to get to do, because it will help us understand some of his words and his encouragement, is to get a little bit of context about who Peter is actually writing this letter to. And so just very quickly, I want us to get to look at 1 Peter 1:1. It's the first verse in this book of the Bible. Peter writes, he's just introducing himself. He says, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. Peter as a follower of Jesus Christ. To those who are the elect exiles of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. Now that's a short sentence, but there's actually a lot that we can get about who his intended audience is there. And just so you know, if you ever find yourself thinking about sitting down and trying to read a part of the Bible, let yourself know a little bit about who the author is and who their audience might be. Because some of that context really helps us with an awareness of the words we're reading. It can help us bring some meaning to words that were written then or were very much for us right now. And so who Peter's writing to are some of the earliest Christians. They're no longer a part of Jewish faith, but they are now trying to be these early Christians, these early followers of Jesus, or an early follower of the way. And he's writing to them because this is during a specific time in history known as the diaspora. That's why he lists all those places. Because what has happened at this point in history with the earliest Christians is that many Jewish families have been scattered. That's what diaspora means. They have been scattered from their homes, from their ancestral land, from everything that they knew for generations. They have been removed and forced to go live somewhere else, in much of what we might understand as like a modern day Asia type of area. And so when he writes to them, that doesn't just mean that they've moved and they need to figure out the new neighborhood. For Jewish people specifically at this time, being removed from your community was so difficult because the community was everything for you. It was within the community that you even knew how to relate to each other. You would learn your laws and your morality and your ethics, and you would see it reflected back with the community that you lived within. It was within the community that you honestly learned how to relate to God. Who is he? Who am I to him? And what do I do as a result to that? It was within the community that you honestly got to ask your identity questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? What does that mean for me? What does that mean my future might hold? All of those things are grounded within their community. And so when he says that they've been scattered to other places, this doesn't just mean they have to move. This is painful and difficult. This is decentering and disorienting. And they might find themselves asking, who am I at this point? And he's writing his letter to them. And then much of 1 Peter actually has to do with difficulty. He talks about suffering and he talks about being insulted and going through something really harmful. In fact, this is how he puts it in 1 Peter 4. He writes to them, beloved, you people who might feel scattered, you people who are the earliest Christians trying to hold on to this love of Jesus when life is so confusing. My beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you in order to test you, as if it was something strange were happening to you. Instead, rejoice insofar as you share in Christ's sufferings, that you might also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. Now, part of where he comes from when he writes about fiery trial or he writes about suffering or difficulty is that many scholars believe Peter is in Rome while he's writing to these early Christians. And he's probably in Rome during the reign of Emperor Nero. And Romans and Emperor Nero are really well known for extreme persecution against Christians, especially these early Christians in this early church. And there's a reason for that. Roman people looked at Christians, the early Christians, and they didn't make sense to them. They felt like, okay, I figured out these Jewish people. I understand a bit of their faith. I've gotten used to them being around me. And now here comes what they often called a superstition. Here comes this other movement of these Christians, these Christ followers, and I don't know who they are. And so many Roman people, many historians actually referred to early Christians as atheists. Because to Roman citizens, they're like, you don't follow Roman gods and you don't follow Judaism. I'm gonna guess you just don't follow anything. And so they'd classify them that way. But also, there are a couple of histories that record that early Christians were known to be cannibals. And that's because people would hear them saying things about partaking in Jesus's body because of communion or Eucharist. But that wasn't some practice that other people had an understanding of. So they would hear them talk about this and they're going, what's going on over there in that new movement? These Christ followers are eating somebody's body? They just didn't make any sense to them. Or a couple of histories actually record that early Christians were known to be incestuous because they would go around and they would hear people say, I love you, brother. I love you, sister. Or married people would refer to each other as a brother or sister in Christ. And so the Roman citizens are listening to this going, that's really weird, whatever is happening over there. And so they just developed these misunderstandings, and it created where Christians just became these outliers and very much just this other group of people. And so what that meant is that for Nero, they became really easy scapegoat. When things were tough, or maybe Rome was on fire and burned down, these early Christians became a really easy people group to blame because there were so many misunderstandings. Everybody already thought they were weird and other. And so imagine for a minute, you're trying to be one of these early Christians, because you know what happened when Nero turned you into a scapegoat? Is then he could create a public spectacle of torturing you to gain back public opinion. And Nero did that. It was rumored that one of the things Nero would do, he had these really big, pretty gardens. And so what he would do is when people were arrested for being Christians, he would actually hang them up in the gardens. And when night came, he would burn them alive and have people come and do tours of his gardens at night while the Christians would burn there. Or he would feed them to animals during the gladiator games, or other forms of just barbaric torture, and he would make public spectacles of it, because if the Romans believed they're the cause for my pain and my harm, this actually helped him in public opinion when Romans were dissatisfied with his life, if he could get them to turn on the Christians. So imagine for a minute being one of these early Christians in the Roman area. In fact, this might actually be true for a few. Imagine you have discovered the love of Jesus in your life. Maybe there's a real moment of that for you. Imagine what that was like. I think he might be real, and I think he might actually love me, and I think it might actually matter. It's kind of exciting, but it's kind of scary. But you've decided this matters. And so I'm gonna do something in my life where I actually live out this faith. I think it changes me and it changes how I show up to this world. And so back then, the way you lived out this faith, the way that you followed Christ usually had three big components. One of the things they would do is that the Christians would come together to be able to care for the widows in town. Because when a woman was widowed, she lost her security and she lost her protection. And so it was common for a widow to actually have to turn to prostitution to be able to take care of herself, to find some security. And then these Christians would show up and go, no, come be a part of us. We'll feed you, we'll take care of you, we'll help provide some security for you. Or the second thing that Christians would do is they would do the exact same thing to be able to care for orphans. Because orphans back then did not have value and they didn't have worth, so they weren't very well taken care of. They could be just left out on the street. And then these Christians would get together and they would show up and they would actually say, no, we're gonna adopt this kiddo and we're gonna feed this kid and we're gonna raise this kid and you can be a part of our community because we believe that you are God's kid and there's value, we wanna take care of you in that. Or the third thing that they would often do is they would try to come together as this early community of people because they're saying we've encountered Jesus and it matters and we want to stay anchored in the person of Jesus and in his heart to keep bringing that into our community. So this is what you're trying to do, if you can imagine. And then there's a fire. And Nero says it's your fault. And suddenly your neighbors, who just thought you were weird, but kind of interesting, they now blame you for their pain, for their harm, and for their loss. And you start watching your friends be arrested and tortured or other barbaric things. How does life feel for you? Isn't it? It's difficult, but it's scary and it's confusing and the world just kind of feels upside down. This is not what it was supposed to be. Why is this happening? And while this is the context for where Peter's writing out of, one, he certainly believes it's not gonna stay in Rome. He's writing to these early Christians saying, this is the experience here, but I need you to know that fiery trial is coming for you also. And while that's their context, every once in a while for us, doesn't it also feel a little bit like the world's on fire? And maybe not the whole world, but like your world? Like you might have something going on in your world that is so difficult or overwhelming, decentering, or confusing. And you find yourself walking around and up feels down and down feels up, and it doesn't matter what you do. You can't get ahead of it. You can't seem to make the right choice. You can't seem to make up for whatever. And it just feels like life is confusing and life is scary and life is difficult. And when you're in a situation like that, how hard is it to try and choose love? How difficult is it to try and say, I'm gonna take a posture that trusts God, and I'm gonna try and believe God is still good when my life feels like it's on fire a little bit? And it's the same situation that Peter's writing to. And so in moments where we might feel like that, Peter has a couple of words of encouragement, and he's going to start with older Christians. What might be our opportunity when we step into times that feel difficult or decentering? How can we as a church, what unique role might we have? And that is 1 Peter 5, in the first 3 verses, 1 through 3. I want to read it to see what Peter says, and then be able to go back and talk about it. This is what Peter says in 1 Peter 5, 1 through 3. So I exhort the elders among you, because of this difficulty that is coming, and it's not going to stay in Rome. It's going to come to where you are now. Because of this happening, the elders among you, as a fellow elder myself, as a witness for the sufferings of Christ, as well as our partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed, shepherd the flock of God that's among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, and not domineering over those in your charge, but actually being examples to the flock. So the first thing, for a little bit of context of what Peter is saying, when he says, I exhort the elders among you, elders was a position within the church, like someone who would help run certain things in the church. But you have to remember, this is its earliest movement. If you're an elder in this church, it's really not that hard to believe that you are one of the older people in that church, because otherwise, how are you going to lead and remain a movement at this time? So most likely he's speaking to the older people, and he says, I'm one of you, and what we have been are witnesses. He says, older people, we have been witnesses of sufferings as well as great glory. And what Peter's really saying is, older Christians, like, you guys have seen some stuff. You guys have experienced some life. You have walked through some incredible lows and losses, but you have also known incredible moments of joy. You have experienced in your own life at a point where the world felt a little bit like it was on fire, except you're still standing here now, and you know that we can get through it. And what Peter says is that life, those experiences, the good, the bad, the in-between, is an incredible gift that the rest of the church needs from you. In fact, he says, I think one of the points he makes is that an older generation can become an anchor when the world feels difficult. When the world feels difficult because of your life experiences and what you've been through, it is a gift that can make you feel like an anchor when the rest of us feel so decentered and like we don't know what the next step looks like. In fact, some of you in here, think about some of the things you've been through. Some of you in here, you have stood after high school graduation. Think back to it. You stood after high school graduation. You know what it is to look ahead, and it's kind of exciting, but you're also really terrified because you don't know what to do. You don't know what the next step is. What if the choice that I made isn't the right choice? And what if, like, there's so many options in there, and what if I mess up? Does that just mess up everything? What a gift you would be if you could show up in the life of someone who's currently there asking all those questions and say, hey, just so you know, I've been there. You're gonna be okay if you change your major. Hey, I've been there, and just so you know, you don't have to take a traditional path. Man, I remember feeling like that, and I am so sorry. There's a lot of stress in that. Just so you know, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna learn a lot, and you're gonna be okay, and I'll be here for you. What a gift that would be to that kiddo standing on the edge of high school going, I do not know what to do with the life in front of me now. Some of you in here, you're currently in a stage where you are trying to date. And dating right now, what? You are trying to date. You are trying to figure out what relationships look like. You are experiencing heartbreak. You are trying to survive your first year of marriage. That all comes with so many of its own unique moments. How cool would it be if somebody who's been there and walked through it came alongside and saw you? Said, yeah, that is tough. Man, I remember going on a first date that was something else. Hey, just so you know, choosing to commit or choosing vulnerability, it's scary, but man, is it worth it on the other side. And I know because I've walked through it. They're not making your moments smaller, but there's something about knowing they walked through it and they're willing to stand with you while you go through your own. The comfort of that, wouldn't that be such a big deal? Myself, I'm doing this parenting thing. Dude, my kid turned 3 yesterday, and it was a Spider-Man birthday, and it was amazing. I love him deeply. Light of my life, that one. But what is this stage, you guys? He is great, and his smile is beautiful, and I love him. And then he started saying this new thing to me the other day where he says, "You're not the boss of me." Bro, you've been speaking words for like a year, and you think I'm not the boss of you? He has opinions about what he will and will not wear, and why is everything wrestling with an elbow? Like there's no warning, and here comes this little body. Ugh. And I love him, but like, how long does 3 last? But some of you in here, you're hanging out with my other favorite people, which are your teenagers at home, and I love them. But if you go home to them, some of you might find yourselves asking, why are they always so angry? Why are they always so angry? Why are they always telling me, "Mom, you're trying to ruin my life. Dad, you are no fun at all"? And what do you do when they start driving? And this little creature who kind of thinks they hate you, but you know they don't really, and they just take off in this giant vehicle and you're hoping that they come back? Like, wouldn't it be great if someone could come alongside you raising a 3-year-old and be like, "I know, they're a lot. You're doing your best." Let me tell you what my kid did at 3, and right now, just so you know, they're like a whole adult, and they're thriving, and they're okay. You will be okay, and he will be okay. Whew. I know your teenager says that they hate you right now, and they're so extra, but what I hope for you is one day, maybe they'll come home, and they'll actually say, "Man, I'm sorry. I would actually love to get your advice on this moment." And you get a chance to reconnect and have a different type of relationship with them when they're a little bit older. Wouldn't it be great if you're in that stage and somebody helps you find a breath and say, "Okay, I can get through this next step of whatever this might look like"? Or you might find yourself being an empty nester. You might find yourself trying to navigate what it looks like to be a single parent or divorced and trying to put life back together after that. You might know what it feels like to have been skipped over for a promotion, or to not know if you chose the right career path, or to be in a job where you feel like you are in over your head all of the time. You might know what it looks like to walk through political moments and you're kind of like, "Yeah, another one's coming." And for those of us who might be in that stage right now, what a gift it is if you, as an older Christian, take all of that life experiences you've had, the highs and the lows, and you came alongside us and said, "While you're walking through it, I know it's tough. It feels like a storm and it feels wobbly. Let me help anchor you. Let me be a source of encouragement. Let me be a source of advice. When your life feels on fire, let me be a place that says there is life after this, and I'll help you hold on tight to that." You know, in times of crisis, an older generation, they can be a place of stability and encouragement, or they can be a spot of being discouraging and more chaos. What would it look like to get to take the gift that your life is and come alongside younger people and say, "I see you and I'm for you, and let's figure this out together. I'll help you hold steady"? And Peter says, here's a really good way to try and do that. Because his next words that he says, do that by shepherding the flock of God that is among you. Step in as a shepherd, but not just any shepherd. He says, don't exercise oversight as if you have to, as if you are compelled. Don't do it for gain, as if now you're owed something, so they better do the right thing, but actually do it eagerly. He really shows up and says, be a compassionate shepherd for the younger Christians around you. You know, a shepherd leads in a really unique way. A shepherd is not an authoritarian figure which says, do it my way or else. And a shepherd does not speak harshly or stand really far away that if the sheep need something, they actually have to go find the shepherd. In fact, the way that shepherds get to lead is they actually have to start out by being with the sheep. They actually have to live and spend a lot of time amongst the sheep because what they're trying to do is build up trust. They need the sheep to get used to their presence and to trust that they have their best out for them. That's actually why a shepherd is able to speak with voice commands, because the sheep have gotten used to their voice because they've spent so much time with them. That's why if sheep hear the voice of somebody else, they've gotten so used to their shepherds, they know that's not theirs, and so they won't follow it, which is good in case another voice doesn't necessarily have their best at heart. A shepherd lives amongst the sheep. And so what Peter is giving us an opportunity to say is he's saying to be this community of Christ, that even in times of difficulty, we are actually a clearer expression of Jesus and his love and his heart. We actually need to come together, not with force, but actually as with older Christians sharing their gift of life as shepherds who come alongside the sheep and show up for them in that way. And so I wonder, for some of you in here, ask yourself, do you have a younger person in your life that you think, I care about them? Because that's the gift of a shepherd. A shepherd cares about their sheep. They actually want to see their sheep do well. They're for them. They like them. They think they're important. Do you have a younger person in your life that you think, I care about them and they matter to me? Well, then consider taking a step to spend time with them. Ask them to coffee. Hey, do you want to get coffee with me? And if you're like, I don't do coffee, okay, lunch. Like, there's a lot of variety out there. You're saying, do you have a moment that we could spend time together? And then when you get to do that, ask them questions. I know that sounds weird, because if you've got a teenager at home, you're like, Stacie, if I ask them questions, they grunt and they're fine. I know, but that's because you're their parent. If you are not their parent and you sit down and you ask them questions about their lives, they love to be asked those questions. They want to tell you, this is what life is right now. These are the questions that I've got. This is what's going on in my world. They want to know you see them and you care and they matter and you're willing to open a little bit of space in your life for them. Do you have anyone in your life like that? And if you find yourself in here thinking, I don't know if I have anybody like that in my world, I know one of the things a lot of people wish is that we would create some type of like mentorship program, and that has its role, but honestly, that's not a very organic connection. Instead, what if you just looked around this room or this campus? We have a wide amount of ages and generations here at Cassis, here in this room. What would it look like if you said, I want to create space so that they know, that younger generation knows that they matter and I'm glad they're here? You just said hi to them. You served alongside them, you greeted them. What if you just made it your goal to learn their name, and then the next time you see them, you actually called them by their name? I know it sounds small, but it would do incredible things. And you know what else? Consider a way just to be able to like say, I see you. I know this sounds small, but if you tell a high school student, hey, cool sneakers, like I see the fit, I like the haircut, cool hat, I know that you're kind of like, what, that's weird. No, if you compliment their sneakers, you have them for life. Like you just do. Some of them, if you just say to a person like, dude, you're in school, how's that going? Physics, right? Ugh. A bunch of them are in drumline right now. Ask them about instruments. They will talk your ear off and they will feel so special. And that's not just high school students. It's younger Christians anywhere. Ask them what their life looks like because you care, because they matter, because you see them and you've learned their name and you created space in your life because they are important. What you get to do is, as a shepherd, you're showing up and you're saying, you matter to me, and maybe with enough trust, my voice will get to matter in your life a little bit too, and I can help guide you. Not forcefully, but because I see the cliff you're running for, and I might be able to help you avoid it, because I've been there and I can help you anchor through this difficulty. But I think there's also something important that Peter puts right there in verse 3 about what it looks like to be a shepherd. When he says, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. Because shepherds lead in another unique way. They do not control every part of their flock. They do not maintain control over all their decisions. It's actually incredibly beneficial to a shepherd to have sheep that make their own choices, that means that they're growing. It means they're developing and they're getting healthier. Shepherds want to see sheep who are making their own choices. And so what that might mean is you might have a younger Christian in your world, a younger person, and they've invited you in and you're giving them some advice and you see where this road goes and they say thank you and they try it. Cool. Or they say, thanks, I'm gonna do it my own way anyway, for better or for worse. And you know, that may be frustrating, but it's also what you got to do. You got to be young and you got to experience and you got to live and you got to make choices. And there were people who gave you great advice you listened to, and there were people who gave you advice that you wished you'd listened to. And there's a gift in that too. And so when you come alongside people, remember you are guiding them, you're not minimizing them, you're meeting them exactly where they are. You know, this older couple, when we had a lot of disagreements, like they tried to give me advice and sometimes I listened to it and other times I was like, thanks, and I tried it my own way, and sometimes I had to come back and say, you were right, that was my bad. But they were always there for me, and the gift they were is even if I ignored them, they always had space for me. They always had acceptance to say exactly as you are, show up, and we've got space in a relationship right here. And I love that, and it actually meant I trusted them, and they got to have a lot of space in my life, and they still do. In fact, I remember when my husband, Andy, when we got married, we had done long distance dating for 2 years because he was in the military. So for 2 years, our dates were FaceTime once a week. And then we got married and he was stationed in Germany. And so we suddenly moved to Europe after getting married. And I remember like those first 2 weeks, because what we had done up until then, for the most part, we had only been together for like 2 week stretches at a time once he joined the military and he left, which was like cool until you live together. Until we get married, and that thing that was like really cute for 2 weeks and was like a funny joke, suddenly he's still doing it. Like he's still doing it. I was teasing him just this last service. One of Andy's favorite things to do is we're watching a show and he spends the whole time telling me how not real it is. That's not how they would hold that. That's not what that outfit would look like. He wouldn't actually talk. I know, it's a TV show, man. Like I know. And after 2 weeks, I was suddenly like, he's still here and he's still doing that. Cool. But then he got to learn what it was to live with me, because this is a lot all the time. And I have learned, I'm a little bit of like a really cool pack rat. And so I live in piles everywhere. And I don't just mean like my side of the room, because the piles have taken over. I mean like in the kitchen, in the living room, my shoe pile over there. Like I just have to live with that. And Andy got to experience that 2 weeks later. He's like, weird, this is all still here. And I was like, I know, right? You're welcome. And then Andy, he's so sweet, but he's also like an introvert, which is cool because I'm not. And so I remember like the first couple months of living together, it was just us. And we just had this 1-room apartment with the military housing. And so he'd get home from work and I would get home from work and I was like, my favorite person. Tell me about your day. What did you eat? Who did you talk to? Do you want to go for a walk? Look at this new adventure I found. And precious Andy was like, stop. I have peopled all day. I need to sit on the couch. I want to not use my words anymore. And we had to figure out what that meant. And so after 8 months of this, we came home to visit, and that couple asked us out to dinner, and they go, how's life? What is it like to be married? And you know what? I knew them, and I trusted them, and they had a voice in my life, and I knew they were for me, and so I didn't have to say, it's great. I got to say, it's great, and did you know about this? Is this normal? Did you know it's also kind of like really difficult, but kind of awesome to be married and live really far away from everybody? And what do we do about this? And I remember they were just so kind at dinner, and they smiled, and they're like, yeah, that's gonna happen. Yeah, that is tough, and I'm sorry you're going through that. Let me share you my story of how we went through that. And they were an introvert extrovert, so they were like, yeah, Stace, you need to give him space. Like there were just things in there. And I remember getting in the car with Andy, and he goes, well, you were really honest with them. And I was like, of course, they're my people. But he also said, man, was that encouraging. Stace, we're fine. We're okay. People have been through this too. This is all right. And it helped us ground ourselves in that first year of marriage, or now dealing with a 3-year-old, dealing with the complexity that is foster care. That same couple shows up right alongside us and says, you're doing your best. We're praying for you. We're here for you. Yeah, we've walked through that too. And it's an incredible, incredible gift when they take their life experiences and they show up right alongside me, not to force me into things, but to guide me and then say, I'm right here with you and you always have a place with me. And when we come together, crossing generational lines, we as a church have an opportunity not to have half of the image of Jesus, but actually a whole picture of Christ's heart. a whole expression and image of Jesus's love and compassion and goodness, not just right here, but for our community, for Tucson, for the people that we care most about. So consider, maybe this week or maybe this series, who are some people in your life that you might be able to create a little bit of space for?